Okay, I wanted to make a video about this article in The Atlantic written by Rogé Karma. And what spurred me to make this video was that I saw a lot of posts about it, but the captions or descriptions set alongside it had nothing to do with what was inside the article. I think it's very well written, and I highly recommend you read it for yourself. And this first part of the video, I'm going to talk about what is actually in the article. So the main points of the article, we know that California and New York have high housing costs. And historically, these smaller cities such as Phoenix, Miami, Atlanta, and Dallas have lower costs, but as of late are skyrocketing. And the author puts forth the idea that it's possible that no matter what, all roads lead to NIMBYism. And one fact to back up this claim is that the Sunbelt states' rate of building housing has slowed down even as demand to live in those cities have increased. And the author also debunks the theory that after 2008, large developers became monopolies and were incentivized to slow down development by showcasing that profit margins have remained the same for these companies. Construction and financing costs have increased after the 2000s, but building homes were still profitable and even more so in the Sunbelt states. And therefore, the Sunbelt is not special. It just took longer for NIMBYism or anti-development to become prevalent. And the author cites a 2018 research paper by Yorko and friends that shows land development is actually just as restrictive in the Sunbelt states, which we view as, pro-growth. And apparently in Atlanta, the zoning code currently looks like the 90s Los Angeles zoning code. And the Sunbelt cities are now approaching the same problems as California as they hit their outward sprawl limit. So you have to start building more dense housing and setting zoning, before it becomes a problem. And Yurko also believes that as people become wealthier and more educated, they will start to use existing laws to prevent new development. And this belief is based on correlation of housing development to college residents, and that usually the wealthiest suburbs are the areas that have the least amount of development. And after a few examples of any development, the author concludes by saying, these smaller, mainly Republican cities have the opportunity to pass lasting pro-housing reforms, such as setting minimum size lots, removing the tyrant's veto, and allowing multifamily housing and existing office zoning before they reach that sprawl capacity and start to hit some of the same problems as California. And then stuff outside of the article and what I was thinking about. I thought this article was well written and interesting because it not only adds the dimension of time, but hypothesizes that in the United States in particular, housing development may be a series of stages. It would have been interesting to compare housing development in a different country that did succeed in building more housing and maybe tease out why that country could do it, but we can't. I would predict maybe like local government politics are less problematic in other places, or just more top down, and you can't reject a statewide zoning law in the same way that local governments in California are doing right now. And then I want to talk more about how this article is being misused to promote the idea that the main reason housing prices are high is because a small number of individuals are hoarding empty apartments or houses. It's just not true because states that have higher housing costs like California and New York have very small number of vacancies. And New York City in particular has a spectacularly low 1.4% of vacant housing in 2023. It bothers me that people think that if you support multifamily or more dense zoning, then it must automatically mean you support saving billionaires over normal people, but that's just not true. I support and believe we should have another bracket for capital gains, implement surtax, have progressive tax for like primary residence, and build more housing, all at the same time. In fact, they kind of go hand in hand because you could use those taxes to build government housing. I don't know why some people think that it's unthinkable to support progressive taxes and build housing at the same time. And we've been generally ignoring why it's expensive to build one unit and how we sway existing homeowners who might have a huge part of their savings in their home. The uncomfortable truth is that people opposed to housing development aren't all rich people. They could just be people who bought houses like a long time ago. It's just any homeowner. And I think in our current world where we have limited attention and we don't have infinite time to promote every idea, we have to choose the top things that will reduce housing costs and push for them. And if you care about people who buy a lot of housing, at least support having property tax that's not capped. That's the main reason you don't just buy land or a building and do nothing with it. You would be better off just putting your money in the stock market or even treasuries. I think that property tax should be graduated by default. So if you want to use land inefficiently by buying a huge house for yourself, you should have to pay taxes to build additional housing that wouldn't need to be built otherwise. But yeah, those are just some things I've thought about while reading the article. I highly recommend reading it, and I've linked it in the description. Have a nice day.